Welcome to Leave Us Alone, the podcast that champions individual liberty and limited government. I'm Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. And today we're diving into what's going on in Maine, what's happening with funding or not funding the government, funny stuff going on with the FTC. Let's see, we've got so many things. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of them today, but mostly the government doing annoying things. And we will comment on such. If you are new here, the show is about one simple idea. Government should be limited, lower taxes, less regulation, fewer rules, more freedom and opportunity for all Americans. The Leave Us Alone movement protects taxpayers, property owners, businessmen and women, gun owners, homeschoolers, religious liberty, and others who simply want the government to leave them alone. It's not too much to ask. Just leave us alone. Anyway, today we are joined by Jack and Mike and James and Grover here. And we're going to start off with an interesting discussion of James Blair, who's not with us here today, but he said something interesting, buttressing the president's point.
Sure. So this is James Blair, the Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House. He did a sit-down interview with Punchbowl News today, where he talked about the possibility of extending the Obamacare subsidies, or rather, how that's not a possibility.
Although from time to time, it smelled like somebody was certainly pushing that.
Yeah, so I think quick background here. I think the last week since our last recording, we have seen Republicans, conservatives digging in their opposition to any expansion of Obamacare, namely the boosted COVID-era subsidies that are set to expire. We've seen great statements from people like Steve Scalise in the House, calling Obamacare a sinkhole, and this is just throwing more money at it. And you had James Blair with the White House make the same point today. His quote, "These insurance subsidies, and to be clear, these are subsidies to insurance companies. They don't actually go to people. They've been artificially masking the cost of premiums. They put these in during the COVID era. Democrats, all Democrats, right, with the tie broke by the vice president at the time, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden was the president. They controlled the Senate. They controlled the House. They voted not once but twice to make this program temporary that we are now discussing and for them to expire." So that is James Blair this morning. I think that is the strongest statement we've seen out of the White House so far, and that fits the pattern of this week. Earlier this week we had Bloomberg and Politico report the detailed conservative opposition, quoting you, Grover, listing ATR, other organizations like Club for Growth, Americans for Prosperity, and a host of others, and really detailing that the whole right is starting to dig in. Grover, is that your sense of things? What's your reaction to Blair's interview today as well?
Well, it is, but it is really slamming the door, maybe for a second time. The other team, the Democrats, had one plan, which was to get up and yell, government shutdown is too painful, and then healthcare, healthcare, healthcare. And they seem to be working on both of those. And every once in a while, the press would argue, and we'd get phone calls. A lot of Republicans are thinking about folding. And when you pressed about who, they didn't really have much of an answer. We did get Marjorie Taylor Greene, who recently came out and said that the lady from Georgia, that the Republicans should fold on that one.
Yes, to help her adult children specifically.
Yeah, her exact quote was, paraphrasing, I guess, but I'm as hardcore against Obamacare as anyone else, but my adult children will benefit from this, was her reason for continuing to support it.
And she also had previously stated the reason she ran for Congress in the first place.
Yeah, we'll see if we can work that clip in, because again and again, she said the reason she ran for Congress was because Republicans sold out and failed to repeal Obamacare. But now she's first one out of the gate saying that she would side with Democrats. But we'll see if she rethinks her position now that the White House is out publicly.
That seemed to be their one hope, was to make this all about healthcare writ large, not about the specifics, because this isn't really about healthcare at all. It's about government spending. But that didn't seem to be working. And now President Trump weighed in just a couple of days ago after meeting with the Republican senators, and he said, we're not going to be giving any money to the Democrats to spend, being held hostage. We are going to insist that they open the government up. Then we can do next year's budget, but we're not going to be held hostage. That was a big deal. And then more recently, we saw Blair, a deputy chief of staff, say something very similar, very emphatic, and he went through exactly even why their effort to hold people hostage wasn't going to work.
And significantly, I think he dropped the context of the shutdown and spoke directly about the subsidies himself, saying this is a scam for the insurance companies.
Yeah, which basically says, this is what they think they're blackmailing us with. They're going to hold it hostage. We're not buying it. So it's not only we're not going to do it, but here's why we're not going to do it, because we're not threatened by their fake attacks.
And I think what's moved the needle here has been the widespread outpouring from conservative groups over the last week or two about how bad of an idea it would be for Republicans to be the one to continue an expanded aspect of Obamacare. I think there's a couple political points worth making too, because you've kind of seen the media and Democrats try to put this argument forward that, well, look, Republicans are the ones in power. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the White House. Premium notifications are going up now. People will blame Republicans. Grover, I'm curious on your take, but I think that is ridiculous. Premiums are going up because Obamacare is failing. The only Democrat plan is to continue throwing more taxpayer subsidies onto the failing Obamacare market.
And
Democrats own that.
Republicans simply need to continue to make that case. We need to talk more often and louder about what a failure Obamacare is and how it's going to keep coming back as a failure. And the other team is going to want us to bail out the failure.
Well, you had a good insight about this recently, Grover, where you said if you look at every industry the left has captured,
yes,
they only just go up over time in price.
The prices, yeah.
It's education, higher education, public education, frankly, too, because we just shovel yet more taxpayer dollars into it.
Fake energy, green energy.
Yeah, green energy and insurance, health insurance. Every industry they've captured with major legislation only increases prices over time for the very obvious reason that
auto industry.
If you subsidize something, the price will go up because the customer isn't actually paying the full price, and so they raise prices to extract more from the taxpayer.
Yeah, and on healthcare, they say they want you to be mad at the pharmaceutical industry, which invents things to save people's lives, and they're subsidizing the insurance companies and the hospitals, the two places where the real costs are being driven up. And they do that, but they don't want you to focus on the hospitals, which are getting more and more expensive, and in the insurance companies, they keep pointing over to the guys who invent drugs that save people's lives, for whom prices are not really going up in the same way. It gets tiresome.
I think there's also on the political side one important narrative that the White House and the president are putting to bed right now by coming out here, and that is that just if you're talking about healthcare, Democrats are somehow winning, that this is a winning issue for them. I think that's so bogus. Backlash against Obamacare launched an entire political movement. The Tea Party had dominated conservative politics for at least 8 years.
Inspired Marjorie Taylor Greene to run for office.
Yeah, as she's made clear. Republicans have proven that this is a winning message. I'm struggling to think of the election, even a single race, where Republicans lost a race because they ran on repealing Obamacare. And here we are talking about an expansion that Democrats twice made temporary that's set to expire. So the idea that Republicans should be afraid in any way, I think is ridiculous. I feel like they've always won by running against Obamacare.
They have. They've done quite well at that. And they just need to keep at it.
Well, and there's also some evidence that the Democrat plan just isn't working on the public relations side. I saw a poll this morning. Unfortunately, I can't remember off the top of my head where it came from or what the exact numbers were, but it was roughly evenly divided. It was 30% or less blame Democrats, 30% or less blame Republicans. I think the Democrats were like a couple points up, but barely any. 20% didn't know the government shutdown was happening, and the other 20% didn't know who to blame. So it's not really working out for them. They're not winning the narrative over. Now we're 3 weeks, as of today, we're 3 weeks in, or I guess a couple days ago, we're 3 weeks in. And it hasn't turned for them, which to me says this is just going to keep going until Schumer sees the poll that he wants. But
I think surprisingly, someone who actually did a good job covering this is CNN, who they have Harry Enton, who does kind of their pollster guy, who's former 538 Nate Silver guy, who I personally like. He made the correct point of comparing the situation to 2018, where 61% of Americans blamed Trump for the shutdown at the time, the Schumer shutdown then. Compare that to now, it's 48%. So Democrats are running around with the polls saying, look, it's 48-55 people blame the president. It's like, well, no, it's actually Trump has improved by 13 points compared to how this was viewed last time in 2018. And overall, the president's approval rating has actually ticked up a point during the shutdown. So,
And this was supposed to be their big shot. This was their one leverage. They keep talking about this is our one chance at leverage. Now what do they do?
yeah, I think they're running into the obvious situation. Most parties that begin the shutdown find themselves is the shutdown isn't actually leverage. So I think with that we can turn away from DC here for a second, and during the shutdown we can talk about the activity going at the state level, lots of elections. Jack, why don't we turn it over to you so you can tell us about the governor's race in New Jersey?
Yeah, in New Jersey, we have a very exciting Republican candidate, Jack Ciattarelli, signer of the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, who is focusing on all the right issues, while his opponent is basically just trying to lambaste him as a pawn of Donald Trump. He got the endorsement of Trump back in May. He is focused on all the right things: rising energy bills, cutting taxes. New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the country. He's made that a centerfold of his campaign. He's done a bunch of recent messaging talking specifically about the regional greenhouse gas initiative, which is basically just a glorified carbon tax among multiple states. So we're really getting an insight into kind of how Republicans can focus themselves, key issues to focus on that are big issues across the country. Obviously, he's running in a state that Donald Trump lost, but polling is showing that he's doing incredibly well and may even be able to pull it off.
And Trump had actually improved in New Jersey significantly compared to his first run. So I think an interesting prospect here could be that the New Jersey governor's race might end up being closer than Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I personally see it that way. Jack was the candidate from 4 years ago as well, and he overperformed massively. I don't believe there was a single poll that showed him above 42%, I think it was, that wasn't from a Republican pollster, and then he ended up losing by almost 2 points. He's got a lot more attention this time, a lot more focus from the kind of the national media and national groups.
You were talking about some of the issues here too. I thought there was a great moment on the sales tax in the debate.
Yeah, this was so Jack Ciattarelli has made it a focal point that he will not raise any taxes. His Democrat opponent
Signed the ATR,
signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. Yeah, and he's a Republican running in New Jersey. Taxes are usually one of their more popular issues they like to run on. His opponent, Democrat Mikey Sherrill, who currently is in the House from North Jersey.
Mikey's a woman.
Mikey is a woman,
Okay.
yes. Mikey is a woman. She, took some clip out of context of Jack talking about, the need for income tax reform in New Jersey. He was talking about some of the other states and kind of how they do things. So he's talking about Tennessee has no state income tax, but it does have a higher sales tax. So he got a question about that, talking about how the sales tax in Tennessee applies to food and clothing, which it does not in New Jersey. So his opponent took that clip out of context and tried to make the implication that Jack is talking about putting a 10% sales tax on everything in the state. She ran ads on this, tried to, pin it on him, specifically the opposite of what he's campaigned on. And anyone who follows New Jersey politics knew it was in bad faith. And then there's a great moment at the debate. This is after she's focusing on this for a week. They're running ads. Both candidates get asked expressly, will you rule out raising the sales tax? Jack, no hesitation, says yes right away and talks about the need for property and income tax reform. And then Mikey Sherrill herself refuses to rule out raising the sales tax when she becomes governor. She tries to make it a centerfold issue of her campaign to paint Jack as a tax hiker. And then she, live, refuses to rule out raising the sales tax.
And the next set of ads was cut for him.
Yes,
His
yeah,
campaign.
exactly.
Saying
Yeah,
that.
there's got a lot of traction with that clip. It's been great.
Well,
Hand your attack over immediately to your own opponent.
Well, it's funny because Zoran Mondami's getting a lot of credit, and a lot of his success appears to be down to focusing laser-like on cost of living issues in the New York City mayoral election. And this is a great example of where a Republican is doing that, right? He is focusing on the cost on utility bills.
Expressly, yeah. I mean, New Jersey had a massive utility bill hike this last summer where there are people talking about their bills going up almost 100%. And I think it's a good area where Republicans are focusing on the right issues. Ironically, the Democrats are trying to make affordability their top issue in this election in New Jersey, even though they've run the state for 8 years and had total Democrat control, and all of the problems of why costs are going up on the state level are expressly their own, but they're trying to pin it on Republicans. So it's an interesting race.
And if you would like to avoid total Democrat control, please consider rating and reviewing this episode of Leave Us Alone. This is how we reach more viewers with 5-star reviews. Even if you think it's maybe 4.5, 4.8, like just bump us up to a 5. Let's do a little. I mean, Grover's a Harvard graduate. Let's do a little grade inflation here and help us reach more people who value liberty. Now, back to the discussion.
Well, let's go to Grover because I think
No,
that
I want to hear
point-
about Maine.
Well, let's go to Grover quick on Chitterelli here first before we turn over to Maine, because I think that idea that he is a Republican who is uniquely talking about the cost of living issues, is that a path forward for other Republicans?
Well, it is, because it's always there on the tax issue. It's always there on regulatory issues. It's there on green energy issues. Those are all ways the Democratic Party raises the cost of living for people while they'd like to avoid the conversation. When they raise taxes, the corporate income tax is paid by you, the consumer. The property tax on the grocery store is paid by you when you buy potatoes. These things are direct attacks on consumers, on your ability to function, and just continuing to remind people, because Democrats like to pretend it's otherwise, is so very, very important. And it makes every issue a cost of living issue.
And I thought Chitterelli did such a great job doing that. I'm thinking the example he specifically talked about Pennsylvania's corporate income tax, right, Jack?
When he was getting asked, he's talked about cutting the corporate tax rate in New Jersey. And when he got asked, how is that going to be possible with the budget? He just said, look at our neighbor in Pennsylvania where the Democrat governor is doing so by taking 1% off a year and just slowly ratcheting it down. I think it's right there for him. I mean, he's got all the right messaging. He's focused on the issues. He knows what he's talking about.
And we're about 2 weeks out from the election now, and you're looking at a Republican who's about tied in the polls right now. We've started all this focus on Mamdani in New York. A Bolshevik winning New York City is not anything that should surprise anyone.
It's not a surprise.
A Republican winning in an off-cycle year in New Jersey with a Republican in the White House who, even if he doesn't win, he's making this thing close. He's tied right now in the polls. I think that's absolutely a path forward for Republican that deserves more national attention than he's getting.
Yeah. Usually the party in power in the presidency loses the Virginia governor and the New Jersey governor by a substantial amount. When the Democrats had it, we swept both.
And here, right, we've talked about before, I think the economy, cost of living, you're talking about an issue that's dominating over 40% in polls right now as the top issue for voters. I think Republicans are not doing enough to talk about it. As far as I can tell, Chitterelli is the guy who's doing it the best. And I think I hope everyone else is watching.
And if you don't do it like Jack Chitterelli is, you leave the door open for the Mamdamis of the world to come through and say, wait, they're not even competing on this issue. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to say, just throw money at all the problems.
I was going to make that point. That's, like I said, the Democrats are trying to, peg themselves, kind of talking about affordability, cost of living. The irony is that most of the things they're talking about, especially New Jersey specific, are because of their policy failures. So if Republicans aren't focused on these issues, you leave a door open for Democrats to come in and gaslight you and lie about why things are the way they are.
And the Chitterelli ads are so good. I mean, it's just the message is so disciplined. It's tax cuts, and I'm going to cut your energy bills.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he got Kelsey Grammer to do one for him too.
He did. He did get the coveted Kelsey Grammer endorsement in New Jersey.
Well, let's hope he fares better than that congressional candidate from that episode of Frasier that a few of the elderly members of the audience may remember. So can I talk about Maine?
Maine, yes.
Yeah, so my beloved home state, Maine, is a state in the northern part of the country. Used to be part of Massachusetts until...
I was going to really talk about Maine.
Yeah, well, until 1820, we seceded and joined the United States of America. I had planned that out for a week. Thank you for stepping on it. So full disclosure, once upon a time in a previous life, I worked for Senator Susan Collins, the incumbent. She is the only Republican who represents a state that voted against Donald Trump 3 times and is in 2026 the only Republican senator up in a state that Kamala Harris won in 2024. So she's perennially seen as like sort of the last Republican representing a real blue state as a top target for the Democrats. I worked for her during the 2020 cycle when they dumped $70 million on that race. And in Maine, yes, the airtime in Maine is cheap. And frankly, it actually backfired on them because, people be watching Jeopardy and literally every ad was Sarah Gideon, her opponent. And they got sick of her. And I think she lost votes because they ran too many ads for her. But, it was a tough fight. It was COVID. There was a lot going on, a lot of headwinds. Biden won the state by 7 points rather. But Senator Collins was reelected by 9. Nonetheless, they're still going to keep trying again. And this time they thought they had a great candidate in Janet Mills, the incumbent governor who's won statewide a couple times, unlike some of her other opponents in the past. They had a great recruit. She's reasonably popular, not super popular. Her favorability is underwater as governor. Personally, is not super unpopular. Definitely somebody who knows how to win and would give her a tough fight. She took a while to decide whether she was going to run. She didn't announce until last week. In the meantime, a man by the name of Graham Plattner decided that he would get the jump on her. And he decided to jump into this primary running as a socialist with Bernie Sanders' endorsement. He's trying to portray himself as a working-class oyster farmer. The media dutifully reprints that he's an oyster farmer. His real background is that he was a Blackwater contractor who worked for the State Department in Afghanistan doing who knows what, and was a former Marine, and also went to some Tony private school in Connecticut. So he used to be a bartender actually at Tune In on Capitol Hill. So, his parents are both lawyers. His mother's a small business owner. So this guy he definitely comes from an elite background, certainly by Maine
Does he
standards.
have any oysters?
Yeah, so he's bought an oyster farm at some point in his life, and this is like the business he runs. It's almost like a hobby farm.
You grow oysters like wheat or?
It's aquaculture.
Okay.
You have a little a cove, I guess, that you fence them in, and you breed oysters in there and don't let them escape. But anyway, so this guy, there was a lot of grassroots enthusiasm around him. The Bernie bros were really mobilizing. And as we're seeing around the country, these really hard left candidates, the Mondamis of the world, are starting to beat establishment Democrats in primaries. So he raised $4 million really quickly. He's continued to post great fundraising numbers for small dollars. As I said, he got the Bernie Sanders endorsement. AOC's been stumping for him. He's really taken off. It captured the imagination of a lot of millennial Mainers I know who are posting about him on social media. Well, a couple weeks ago, his old Reddit posts surfaced where he disparaged rural whites and black people at the same time and talked about how all cops are bastards and described himself as a communist. He also was part of the Socialist Rifle Association, which unfortunately are not part of the Leave Us Alone coalition because they don't want to be left alone with their guns. They want to use them to tell us what to do. So sadly, he's pro-gun, but not in a good way. Although, I respect him for running a shooting seminar for those people. And so his campaign has started to take some hits. And then this week it was revealed he has a Nazi tattoo on his chest of not like a swastika, but the insignia of concentration camp guards of the Einsatzgruppen in the SS, which is a particular skull and crossbones design. To do damage control, he the other day got it covered up with a tattoo of what he could describe as a Celtic wolf, but looks awful lot like the Fenris wolf running around the earth from Norse mythology, which, not to give them too much credit, but the Nazis have appropriated a lot of Norse mythology as well. So it's like gone from explicitly Nazi to adjacent, and I don't think it was quite the escape hatch that he'd hoped for. He claims that he got it drunkenly in Croatia once, so I don't know if producer Adam can direct us to the tattoo parlor where that may have happened, so we may get some more evidence about the decision-making process. So I mentioned all of this because it's very, it's funny, it's getting comically extreme over there. But a poll came out yesterday morning after all of this.
1 second, does his polls go up?
He is leading 58% to 24% over Janet Mills among Democratic primary voters in a poll by the University of New Hampshire. Now, granted, this was before the tattoo broke, but as one commentator put it, it is entirely possible that the people who got excited about his campaign in the beginning are sticking with him because they're not concerned he may have once been a Nazi because they're certain he is today a communist. And this is the way the Maine Democratic Party appears to be going. I just want to mention one last thing that everybody else is leaving out of this story that I find personally amusing. You guys have been hearing about Katie Porter out in California, right? And how she was very abusive to her staff and dumped boiling mashed potatoes on her father's head.
She refused to admit or confirm that there were no other videos they were doing that to people. She got expressly asked, can you guarantee us that there aren't other videos of you doing this to staff? And she refused to say yes, which
her
means
staff was getting her shot a lot.
Yeah, which means there are many other videos out there.
Well, speaking of her staff, her former chief of staff apparently is also from Maine. and is also running in this Senate Democratic primary and is placing a distant third at 1% behind the incumbent governor, who would be the oldest freshman senator in history if elected, but otherwise is boring, and this wacko with Nazi.
Okay.
So all this to say, I think Senator Collins, I haven't spoken to her, but if I had to guess, I think she's rather bullish on her chances next fall.
When is the primary? How?
That'd be in April. So there's several months
okay.
for this. He's got a lot of time to recover.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's Maine.
So yeah, we're doing great without the tutelage of your home Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
That's an interesting one. What happens with the FTC?
Oh yeah, so and some more ATR related news. I have an op-ed that I would encourage all our listeners to go read at realclearmarkets.com. This is about how the renegade FTC is undermining the Trump agenda. And just in short, we rely on private sector investments to innovate. We are the most innovative nation in the world. China is trying to race against us and catch up with us in innovation and technological output. They do it by stealing their people's money and by leveraging their economy and borrowing money they don't have. Their debt to GDP ratio is way bigger than ours to fund it. We do it by allowing people to keep their own money and investing it in things that work. And in this case, it'll be our largest companies, our tech companies, investing in data centers and in energy infrastructure to make sure those data centers can run. This is going to lower energy costs in the long run for all consumers by increasing our capacity. It's going to create thousands of construction jobs and hundreds, if not thousands, of good paying middle-class engineering jobs in each of the communities where these data centers are built. And they don't tend to be built in big urban centers. They tend to be built out where there's farmland, which will lead to a real estate boom and people selling land to build these, which are going to enable us to win the AI race and stay ahead. So why, in the context of all of that, if we are not a country, as we shouldn't be, that steals people's money and tries to funnel it into this, if we want the private sector to do this, why would we go after the very companies that have the capital to do it and hit them with antitrust suits? And that's exactly what the FTC is doing. President Trump has been very clear that he wants America to lead on AI. He's taken a lot of great policy positions on it in terms of energy infrastructure, in terms of preempting bad state regulations. But at the same time, his FTC is undermining the goals that he has laid out by trying to sue Amazon by making it too easy to use them to buy things.
Who decides what the FTC does?
The FTC has some confirmed commissioners. There's currently only 2, so they're actually not at quorum, but they're appointed by the president, they're confirmed by the Senate, and they decide what enforcement actions to bring.
Okay. I had thought we'd won this fight, that Judge Bork, had written and made the case over the years, decades, that antitrust only makes any sense if you first prove consumer harm. Consumers are being hurt. And then you say, well, let's take a look at what's happening. But when prices are going down, when investment is flowing, and there's nobody harmed, they're just mad because you're a large company competing on a worldwide basis. You may be big for the United States, but the whole world is your oyster, to go back to that previous conversation. You have to compete worldwide. It doesn't do any good to be in charge, be the biggest fish in Brazil or even the United States. You've got to be worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. And what they're trying to do is explicitly move away from the consumer harm standard that has prevailed for the last several decades in antitrust.
What do they want to do? They not consumer harm. We don't care if the consumers are harmed. We care what?
They care that they can bring a suit against you at any time if they decide you're too big, so you do what they say.
It's whatever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no standard for
the
them.
arbitrariness is the point.
Yeah. I think we can close out with one topic here I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up. And Grover, that is the failure of the UN's attempt to impose a carbon tax on us, and the good work of the Trump administration, particularly Secretary Rubio, who has too many jobs, I think, to name throughout this administration. But Grover, can you tell us a little bit about just what happened here and why the UN tries to sneak something past us like this?
Well, the United Nations does a lot of odd and sometimes damaging things. Many years ago, they tried to impose an UN tax directly on countries, on people, on companies, if you were moving money across borders. And they wanted to take a small percentage of transfers of money. You know, when you wire money across from France to Britain, they wanted a piece of the pie. And there was a effort to shout that down. I remember Americans for Tax Reform was leading a fight to get the House and the Senate to pass resolutions of opposition, trying to get a law passed that says we in the United States will never have this happen. I believe the House actually got one passed. We're still looking to find out exactly what happened with that. But now they're back again. The big deal is not wire transfers of money. Now it's a carbon tax because it's going to be a tax on boats going around across the ocean.
On the shipping industry.
On shipping industry, because you go from one country to another. And they're hoping to get a bunch of cash and tax people, but they need the United Nations to vote that they can do it. Now, mind you, I don't understand why the United Nations voting on something like that means we have to believe them, but it's at least a big step forward into convincing people you do. And they sprung it on us last minute. The Trump administration found out about it, focused on it, stopped it narrowly. It was a very close vote. And all we won was to delay it for a year. Said, you can't do it this year. Got put off. They'll be back next year. Keep your eyes open for United Nations. And again, it may not be a tax on shipping next time. They may morph it into something else, but they desperately want the power to tax people, countries, businesses.
And Republicans in Congress, they better make hay out of this issue. I mean, this is the idea that the UN is out there pushing some Green New scam tax on people, I think is shocking, and most people probably don't know about it. I know the Republican Study Committee Chair, Representative Austin Pfluger, has already introduced legislation saying, hell no to this idea. In the past, we've always had Leader Steve Scalise has had the anti-carbon tax resolution in Congress. I think these are two things that should quickly get a vote in the House whenever it is that we get back from the shutdown here.
Oh, and we've got to get out there and put this up again and again and again to let the Democrats vote for having the United Nations tax people, because there will be other taxes. If this one gets knocked down, they'll wait a little bit and come back and tax things that are green.
I would love to see these Democrats in swing states who are talking about how they're somehow going to run on higher energy prices while we have gas taxes at historic lows and domestic production of energy ramping up, try to hang this on Republicans while they come out and try to vote with the UN to impose a carbon tax on American consumers.
And it's interesting, Grover, you had sent us around the breakdown of which countries voted which way.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. If it's not specifically targeted towards shipping, well, that breaks up the coalition that was on our side, because China voted with the United States because they're a major exporter and they don't want to make it more expensive. India is a major importer and is trying to become an exporter. They don't want that to be more expensive. I think Liberia is the country where everybody registers their ships. They don't want the industry hurt. So if you twist it a little differently, you might lose. That's 3 votes right there. That's enough to tip the balance.
And just about all of Europe voted for this tax. Our allies in Europe, the grown-ups.
And the other side with us were oil producers and poor developing countries that don't want things to get more expensive.
And the Europeans, of course, have already hit themselves with a carbon tax. So they view it as they're just hitting everyone else who's not suffering already.
Yes, I think so. Well, that's it for today's episode of Leave Us Alone. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this discussion valuable, please rate, review, and share the podcast. It helps us reach more freedom-loving citizens. And we will be back next time with more insights on how to protect your liberty. And until then, I'm Grover Norquist. Actually, I'm going to be Grover Norquist even after then, but okay. Until and after that, I'm Grover Norquist, and we are working with you for a limited government controlled by a free people.